everyone. Good morning and welcome to another episode. Ask the Alka and Rhea show. Thank you for always being here with us because 80% is showing up to your success. Today, Rhea is going to be taking over the conversation, but before I do bring her on, I want to introduce ourselves. My name is Alka.
My name is Rhea, and
And
welcome
welcome
to
to
our
our
show.
show. We're going to pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Alka. And today we're going to continue from the book of Robert Pace Morby. And so I'm going to share my screen.
Well, you've been used to doing it from Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes, that's right. Yes, so many books.
Yeah.
Okay. So today is from the book of Pace Morby. Today is from the book of Pace Morby, Creative Financing. So today's topic is why are sellers open to creative finance? So money trees is the perfect place for shade. Wouldn't we all want money trees? This is according to Kendrick Lamar. It is the perfect place indeed. There are only a few reasons why people won't sell on terms. So this is the case of Marvin. So Marvin is actually the seller and Pace is the author. So Marvin lives near Virginia Beach. His wife was a middle school teacher for over 20 years. Marvin's wife has Alzheimer's and therefore he needs to sell the home or the house, and he is open to terms. So terms is who's going to buy it, for how long, what interest rate would it be. So now Marvin is open to terms, but he needs a better explanation of seller financing. And this is what we're going to deep dive on today. So this is Marvin and Pace phone conversation. Pace, you are interested in selling the house and may be open to seller financing as a possibility? Marvin, what does that mean? Pace, it means you become the bank. Okay, Marvin becomes the bank. We pay the money you are looking for over time. Since this was new to Marvin, Marvin asked, I don't think I am interested at this time. So he shut Pace off. Why? Because he lacked information. So Pace checked over his notes and got back to the call. Pace, is your house rented or is your house vacant? Marvin confirmed that the home that he's planning to sell had tenants at the time of the call. So Marvin replied, I do not have a lease. I have tenants, but there is no lease. Pace, are tenants on a month-to-month basis? Marvin, 60 days. So Pace answered, so they have to give you a 60-day notice before they even get out? That's a long time, considering what they're planning to do. Marvin, I have to give them 60 days notice and they have to give me 60 days notice. So Pace replied, so in a perfect world, what would you do with a home? Marvin, sell it. Pace, okay, at what price? Then Marvin said, for some reason, the city subtracted a bedroom. I got a master suite. This is the additional bedroom. I've been on a couple of websites and they say it was selling for 270,000. I don't think I'll get that, but we did spend 30,000 on that master suite. Then Pace replied, got it. The city is missing a room, that master suite room that's in there. So their total room count is off. You are not getting as much value as you'd hope because it is without this master suite room. Marvin replied, they said I'd have to get someone to come out and look at it and change the tax records because the realtors won't change it unless the city records show it has 4 bedrooms. I never heard of such. Pace then replied to Marvin, we deal with it all the time. We buy people's house that have a little addition on the back. And because that thing was not permitted properly, other people might not want it. It might be perfectly fine structurally, but it's not considered permanent. Marvin then said, I don't know how it did not get recorded. Pace then reframed the question on the additional information. Pace asked Marvin, what do you think you could get for the house in situation it's in right now? Marvin replied, I'd be happy with 240,000. Pace, right. That is if you get 240,000 on the market, you paid out commissions and all the other stuff. You'd end up with 210,000 or so when you walk away. Marvin, no, I don't want to get less than 230,000 even with commissions. Marvin clarified also, revealing Marvin has not considered the realtor fees and other market penalties. So remember, when we are selling through a realtor, we have realtor fees and other market penalties, other fees as well. There's closing costs. So the total would always be less than what your asking price is. Now, we have to determine the walk away money, the walk away value that we want. To continue, Pace said to Marvin, I'm not a real estate agent, nor would I ever be a real estate agent. I'm not suggesting you pay me commission if I buy it. I'm just suggesting if you do sell it on the market, you've got to sell it for a price you know is high enough that you would net 230,000. You would have to sell it for like 270,000 on the market, then pay commissions, and then you'd walk away with 230,000 or 245,000, somewhere in that ballpark. So Marvin asked, they want to charge? Pace replied to Marvin, of course, yes, 6%. Right? 3% on the seller's agent, 3% on the buyer's agent. And then you have 3% closing costs, you have home warranties, inspections, and other fees. So it is actually more than 6%. You're around 9% total. The national average closing cost is 11%. 11. It's not 6, it's not 9, it's 11% to sell a house. So if you listed it for 270,000, it sounds like that may be a hard stretch to get because you are missing the bedroom, the master suite bedroom that Marvin spent 30,000. And you've got tenants in the house. That might be hard to sell too, because not everyone is a landlord or an investor, but you could probably sell it for 250,000. Sell it. That's the listing price, 250,000. So Marvin paused and then replied, probably 250,000 or 249,000 or something. Pace replied to Marvin, if you list it for 249,000, what do you think you'd get in your pocket after subtracting commissions, after subtracting closing costs, after subtracting inspection, permitting, and others? Marvin then replied, I have not gotten to that detail yet. So Pace said, can I tell you why I'm calling? Because I don't think selling it for cash is the way you should go. But you don't know me from Adam. Taking advice from me is whatever. But my thought is, if you want the highest you're going to get for this house, selling it on the market is number one, a headache. Number two, it leads to 220,000 to 225,000 in your pocket and not the 270,000 that you're hoping for. So why not sell it on seller finance at 270,000. Seller finance at 270,000. So Marvin said, I don't know what I'm getting into with that. He doesn't have any clue as to what seller's finance is. I have not looked at owner financing, or otherwise known as seller financing. So Pace then replied, it's simple. Do you have a loan, or do you own the house free and clear? Now, why is that important? Because these are two different things. If it has a loan and if it's free and clear. Marvin says, yes, I own it 100%. And Pace says, how much are you collecting in rent right now? Marvin replied, 1,550 per month. Pace said, then out of that 1,550 per month, you pay taxes. So 1,550 minus the taxes, minus insurance, minus the repairs, minus the bookkeeping, minus your yearly CPA or lawyer. These are just some of the expenses when you have property that you have to consider. These are big ticket items. So rent minus taxes, minus insurance, minus repairs, minus bookkeeping, minus your CPA or lawyer, you end up netting around 1111, right? Or less. Again, it depends, right? It is 1,100 or less, depending on the expenses of the property. Some property spend more, some property spend less. So Pace then replied, so what if we came in and gave you a monthly payment? And now you act, this is now Marvin would act as a bank. Because why? Because Marvin owns it 100%. There is no loan to it. There is no mortgage attached to it. And Pace continued, we settle on a number, let's say 270,000. Remember, 270,000 was the number that Marvin was going after. And I started making monthly payments to you on it. So you, Marvin, becomes the bank, and I, Pace, is the borrower. So Marvin replied to Pace, okay, but why do you want to do that? Why do you want to pay 270,000, the number that Marvin was asking for? Pace then replied, because we buy a lot of real estate. And the fastest way to buy real estate is to avoid going through the banks, going through the application process. And what you have to remember, if your application is denied, everything falls through because the banks, right, they're very strict in terms of their criteria. So not every application gets approved. So I want to avoid going through the banks, going through the application process. If I, Pace, go to the bank to get a loan on your property, on Marvin's property, what am I going to run into? The bank is going to say, hey, there's a non-permanent addition here. Remember the master suite that Marvin paid for 30,000? It's a non-permanent addition because there was no permit when they did the addition. And everything else, I'd have to deal with the same stuff you are dealing with in order for me, Pace, to buy that house with a loan. Why would I have to come to a bank loan and have to come in and lowball you when I could come in and give you the number you are looking for? Then Marvin agreed. So the Bank of Marvin, this is Marvin owns the property 100%. So Marvin is now becoming the bank. So Pace, in that situation, it's a win-win. I can avoid going through the banks. I can avoid having to go through permit. Everybody wins. If I buy the house from you, I gotta go through permitting to get that extra bedroom accounted for. But if I go to the Bank of Marvin, this is seller financing of Marvin, I say, hey, Marvin, let's create. This is what we need to do now. If we're thinking of seller financing, this is what we need to do. We have to create a promissory agreement that says, I owe you seller, or I owe Marvin 270,000. I give you a down payment. So this is space, or this is me, or this is you. If you want to do seller financing, we have to give down payment. So the seller has cash in their pocket. I make monthly payment to you, just like when you were doing the bank, but this would be less. This is more flexible. It depends on your agreement with the seller. I take over the headache of the tenant because now you're going to be the new owner. I take over the headache of the insurance. And you, Marvin, you seller, just collect a monthly check without the headache. Marvin then replied, what kind of down payment are you talking about? He's becoming excited now. Pace then said, when I go to a bank like Bank of America or Chase, I always ask them, what kind of loan programs do you guys have? Because there's a lot of loan programs. 3-year term, 5-year term, 7-year, 10-year, 30 years, depending on the bank. And they tell me, the bank would tell Pace, we have loan programs at 3.5 down payment, 10% down payment, 20% down payment. And usually the bank is who tells me what they want. And at the end of the day, you, Marvin, just tell me what you want and what you're comfortable with. And that's the beauty with seller finance, because the seller can do whatever he likes, right? In terms of down payment, whatever the seller is comfortable with. So Marvin then said, what do you do with a home when you get it? Pace then replied, we can do a variety of things. Sometimes we turn them into, this is what Pace is doing, assisted living homes, sometimes into behavioral health facilities, and we help people in bad situations. Sometimes we turn them into affordable housing. This is like Section 8. But ultimately, it's usually some sort of charitable thing where we try to help out people and we get the government, okay, involved to help us out with all that kind of stuff. Why? Government, right? Why is that? Because if they're doing affordable housing or behavioral health facilities or sometimes assisted living homes, right? You work with the government because they, this is some charitable thing. So then Pace said, it sounds like we're not going to make a decision on this call. We could do a follow-up call at the end of the day. Here's the reason why people turn to seller finance. So the reasons why sellers becomes the bank or do seller finance. First, when you go and sell it on the market, I don't care what you list it for, 249, 259, that's not what you're going to put in your pocket, right? Marvin then replied, right. Remember the commissions, remember the seller's agent, buyer's agents, remember the other closing costs and other expenses. So this is not the money that's going to be in your pocket at the closing. So Pace then replied, you're going to walk away with an unknown number. You're essentially crossing your fingers and hoping that you get as high as you can because you're waiting for a buyer and you're waiting for an agent to do their job. And when you have to pay an agent to sell your home, you walk out with 220,000. Then when you get that 220,000, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to buy a Maserati? That's an expensive car. Marvin said, no, he laughed. Pace said, you save it, you don't have a return on it. Of course, right? Because when you save it, it's earning you 0.001% in the bank. So that's why Pace said you don't have a return on it if you save it. It's just sitting in your bank account doing basically nothing at 0.5% or whatever. It could be less than that. And with the way inflation is going, you're actually losing money. Most of the sellers who are selling to us on seller finance, they say, look, I don't want to go through any of that headache. I just want the price I want. In this case, Marvin wants the 270,000. Which for you, it sounds like 270,000 is the magic number. Let's say that we've come up with that magic number, 270,000. And instead of just selling it to me on payments, you can charge me interest. That's even better because why? He's the bank of Marvin now. Now, your investment is making you more money than 270,000 over time. Why now? Because Marvin, the seller, is able to charge Pace the interest. And that's why he's making more money than the 270,000. Does that make sense? Marvin then replies, yes, it does. What's the interest rate at now, at today's market? Then Pace replied, it's usually, remember this was several years ago, it's about 2.5 to 3.5 interest with banks right now. Today, it's not 2.5 to 3.5. It could be 6, 7, depending on the situation. So Marvin said, what about people who don't have good credit? What are they at? Remember, if you have bad credit, then it's higher interest. So Pace said they're 4.5% or more, or they just get denied. Either the bank lends them money at a higher interest, or they just got denied. Marvin then says, how much down payment are people putting up on a house for 250,000? Pace then replied, for 250,000 with the loan programs that we're seeing, there's a lot of down payment assistance plans where the government's coming in and paying for their down payments. And then there's another one that's about 3.5% down payment. And then the one that we see kind of rarely, but it still is around about 10%. Our business model is trying to help people who are going through the assisted living. People may be experiencing memory issues, or people may have physical disabilities, those type of things. Marvin says, okay. Then Pace said, I think with you, at the end of the day, it comes down to you. Do you want a higher price? Of course, this is what Marvin wants, right? 270,000. He wants 270,000. Anybody wants a higher price? And do you just want all the numbers sitting at your bank account doing nothing? No interest at all? Most of my sellers who are selling on seller finance are sitting there saying, man, I'm glad on my money not sitting here and doing nothing. Because if I gave you a check for 220,000 today, what are you going to do with it? That's the thing. If you sell it, right? So this is contrasting 220,000. If you use a bank, you get the 200,000, 20,000 lump sum. And if you put it in the bank, it's doing nothing. Or if you sell it on a seller finance, if you sell on a seller finance to me, you are investing because now you get a down payment. That money has interest. That's why Pace said you are investing. You are a note holder in real estate. It creates investment. It's the greatest investment of all time. Marvin, okay, that makes sense. Then Pace replied, here's what I would do. What I would want to do. It sounds like your magic number is 270,000. Then I'd like you to figure out what down payment. So when we're going through seller finance, we got to get the magic number from the seller, right? We got to get the magic number from the seller, which in this case is 270,000. Now we need to ask about the down payment for the seller, and then the interest rate that we're going to charge the seller. And then we're also going to make a follow-up call sometime next week to follow up on the magic number of the seller, the down payment, and the interest rate. Of course, today, if we ask all this, he cannot figure it out. The seller cannot figure it out. That's why we have to do the follow-up call. You want to do some homework for me, and then we can touch base and have another conversation. Marvin says, I'd like to do that. Thank you. So turning a no to a yes. Remember, Marvin initially said no because that is, he didn't have any information. He didn't know what seller financing. So this is how we turn a no to a yes to sellers, especially who owns their properties outright, 100% owned by them. This is how we can turn a no to a yes. The key is to explain the situation. So we got to explain the situation in a way that makes seller finance a no-brainer for both parties. Marvin was apprehensive at first. Why? Because he didn't know anything about seller financing, but only because it is the traditional way. That's what we're used to. We go to the bank to borrow money. If we look back over this dialogue, let's notice that Pace just ignored his first objection. What was the first objection? Marvin said no to the deal, said no to seller finance. He said he was not interested. But again, Marvin said this because he did not have enough information. So when we have sellers who own their property 100% and they say no to us, let's use another way to make them understand what we're offering it to them. In this case, the seller finance information, because a lack of information is sometimes the reason why they say no. So in this case, Marvin did not understand that Pace was willing to put 50,000 more in his pocket than anyone else. Why 50,000 more? So remember, Marvin's magic price was 270,000, okay? That was his magic number. That's the money in the pocket. Now, his property cannot sell for 270. He can sell for 250. And then you have, closing costs. You have closing costs. You have commission. Okay? So in the end, he could just pocket, 200,000 or 220,000 after everything is said and done. So with this, what we're offering, what Pace is offering, is that he was willing to put 50,000 more. So Marvin was going to get what his asking price is without any commission, without any other minuses in there. So when I'm only familiar with the traditional financing, this sounds insane. What is insane? Seller financing is what is insane. If nothing else, it gets the seller's attention. When a seller says, I'm not interested, don't be discouraged. And don't say, just like what Pace did not tell Marvin, well, why not? Right? Do not say why not. What Pace do ask is, how much money can you have in your pocket? So what Pace is trying to do is not question the seller. He didn't say, well, why not? But he's trying to make the seller understand, right? So this is what we need to consider if we're doing the seller financing. So what Pace do ask is, and what you and I would need to ask if we're doing seller financing, how much money can you have in your pocket? This is now letting them understand that the magic number that they're trying to get is not the money that's going to be in their pocket. So how much money can you have in your pocket? Next, what do you need to walk away with? Right? Because the magic number is not the money that's they're going to put in their pocket or they're going to walk away with. And there are a bunch of little things Pace asks so seller won't notice. So you have to ask those other little things as well, which was in the conversation earlier. But when Marvin said, I want 240,000 at the end of the day, Pace knew Marvin meant 240,000 in his pocket. So now, by doing this, Marvin is on the earth now. He let go of the 270,000 that was his magic number. Marvin is now willing to accept 240,000 with all the commissions, with all the other costs when closing on this property. Pace knew that's what Marvin meant, but Pace needed Marvin to see the problem with this logic. So we have to understand that the seller, we need them to see what we're seeing. So Pace took him on that journey. And if you're applying seller financing, you have to take, I have to take, we have to take the seller on this journey. So Pace then said, okay, you sell it for 240,000, so you're walking away with 220,000 in your pocket. Marvin then came back, oh well, I don't want anything else less than 230,000. I want to be 240,000. I don't want anything else less than 230,000. Now, Pace got him working himself down. So he's bringing the seller back to earth. They went from 270,000 now to 230,000 real quick. That's Pace form of anchoring. So he's anchored now to the price of 230,000, the lowball price. You're introducing someone to a new world, so you have to explain the rules of that world in terms they're going to understand. So you have to bring them what you see. You need to let the seller see. Then you search for the pain point, right? First, we need to let the seller see what they're seeing, and then we have to talk about their pain point. Not the buyer's pain point, but the seller's pain point. What pain did Pace find with Marvin that Pace kept hitting on? So these are the pain points of Marvin. So Pace found multiple pain points. This is what you and I need to do when we're doing seller financing. First, he's got an unpermitted addition. Remember the master suite that the seller paid 30,000 for doing that mass addition, that master suite addition, and it's unpermitted. That's a pain point on him. Second, he's not making that much money from the house because his magic number was 270,000, but there's less, right? Less commission, less closing costs. So it would be much less than that. And this is another pain point of Marvin. He's been dealing with tenants for years and there's no lease. It's on a 60-day basis. And so Marvin's thinking, man, this really is not that great of an investment. And Pace got Marvin to say that out loud. So Marvin, the seller, said that out loud, that it is not the greatest investment in his mind, right? Because he was able to bring him to earth. So one Pace got him there. Pace started telling Marvin third stories about Pace's other sellers. Selling because Pace knew Marvin was not interested in seller finance, but it all came down to making sure Marvin understood what he would get if he sells the traditional way. What's the traditional way? Getting a mortgage with a bank. By having him back into the number, his magic number was 270,000, Marvin did it for Pace. Pace just needed to guide him. So we have to let the seller just understand, after all the costs, the money in the pocket is not the money that they're asking for when they sell it. So how can I get Marvin to back into the not so great number that he would get on a cash deal? Cash deal is where the traditional, the bank, this is the cash deal, traditional. Okay? Because when you close, the bank would give you the check for the whole amount. An old adage goes, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So if you have not changed the seller's thinking, if you have not enlightened the seller about the seller financing, he's still of the same education. There's no point. He is still of the same opinion. Pace trying to argue with Marvin and saying, honestly, I'm sorry, your other investor is not going to pay 270,000 on a deal like this. You're asking too much. That does not get Pace to his end goal. So what that means is that you and I cannot be brutally honest, okay? We know that the seller will not get the 270,000. So what we need to do is we just need to do the step-by-step guidance, enlightenment of the seller. as to what makes it like this. We're not going to tell the seller right away, honestly, I'm sorry, but I don't think you're gonna get 270,000. It would not get to our end goal or to Pace end goal. There is no point in arguing with someone when you can simply take them on the journey. Again, the journey, letting the seller understand what seller financing is. Remember the conversation between Martin and Pace? That is the journey. We see how Pace choose his sniper bullets. Pace, so this is what we need to do if we're going to apply the seller financing. Pace, you and I need to focus on the seller, in this case, Marvin's problems. Remember the pain points? We need to focus on the problems and simply guide them over to Pace's side of thinking. It's better for both of them. Marvin just needed to understand what he needed to gain and what he stood to lose. So, my dear friends, this is the end of today's topic. I know it's nice, right? Seller financing, because it gets you on other ways to buy properties. I will continue on the next episode of Alka and Rhea show. So stay tuned for more. And if you have a question, let me know in the comments section below.
Yeah, Ria, that was great information. When it comes to seller financing, what are some of the creative ways that we need to find, right? Because seller financing, not everyone knows the rules, but I guess if you know the rules, it just makes it so much easier.
Yes, that is correct. Understanding what seller financing is and um, getting them on our side, right?
Yeah, exactly. But oftentimes, I mean, that doesn't happen when you say on our side. It doesn't happen that way. So how do you get the buyer or the seller to be on your side if
Right.
it
So,
doesn't happen that way? Because it's not always going to happen.
well, it doesn't always happen because I blame it on myself because I'm not finesse. I don't know anything more about seller financing because I failed on my side to explain what I needed for the seller to see. It is not the seller's problem, it is my problem because I failed to let him see why it's better off that he sell it to me using the seller finance versus listing it in the market, not his magic, remember, it not his magic number, but 240,000, but minus commission, minus other costs, 220,000. So the blame ultimately is on me because why? I failed as a negotiator to let the seller understand, see my world, why he's better off selling to me as a seller finance. So it's
Hmm.
typically
Right.
ultimately it's my failure to let him understand. So that means I, as a buyer, do not know more about the seller financing technique. Second, I am not a great negotiator yet because when you become a master, it takes 10,000 ways, 10,000 hours to get there, right? For us to become a master. So all we need to do, if that did not go through, if it was your deal, then don't worry. There's other deals. Then go try a second time. Then go try a third time. I just need to practice it several times. And then after that, some point in time when we've been practicing this, selling the seller finance to the seller who owns the property outright 100%, then we'll become finesse. We'll become like a master. Like we know it at the back of our head that we don't need a cheat sheet to go through with it. So why it
Right.
failed? Because we don't know much about seller financing. We are not a great negotiator yet. So we have
Exactly, and always do your due diligence. Like I said, you don't know about what you don't know. So what you don't know, you don't know. But if you want to get the into doing creative financing, seller financing, then you have to learn. You got to do your due diligence because that's the only way we master anything is by learning, and taking that step is going to get you there.
right taking the first step, but the first step, guaranteed it's not a success, because why, we're all still learning, we're still students, right? So don't be dismayed, don't let your hopes down, because then there's a second, another house. As long as you're always looking for houses and you introduce to them the seller financing, at some point in time we're gonna eat up these words. It's like at the back, it's just like an ordinary phone conversation with us now, because why, we're used to selling, we're used to talking about the terms. We're so used to why seller financing is better in terms of the traditional route or going through the bank. So it just takes practice. So you have to deploy the knowledge.
Right, exactly. Love it. Well, we've come to the end of another amazing show. Thank you for being here with us, and we will see you the same place, same time, come tomorrow morning. Enjoy the rest of the day. Make the rest of the day the best of your day. Thanks, Rhea.
Thank you, Alka.